Now, why is it that we're talking about supply and demand? It's because there is an inherent economic problem in the world, and that is scarcity. Now, scarcity as an economic concept refers to the basic fact of life that there exists only a finite amount of human and non-human resources, which is the best technical knowledge is capable of using to produce only limited maximum amounts of each economic goods. And that we have a very limited resources and we have expendable resources that we can no longer reuse that are like fuel. We cannot reuse fuel that is natural resources. We cannot reuse natural resources are expendable. This can be depleted. And so there is a limitation, there is an inherent limitation of our ability to produce these manufacturing items and goods or services because there is a limit in our natural resources. There is a limit of our financial resources. There is a limit of our factors of production, our raw materials. Of course, there is a limit in our time because we can only do so much in a particular period of time. And also there is a limitation of our energy because the source of our energy is also limited. Unless otherwise we can harness the overall power of the sun in order for us to power this generation forward. But that is yet too far and just a scientific imagination. And so what we're going to do is we have to divide and allocate these resources, the limited resources that we have, in order to suffice the need of our industry and our community. And so that is scarcity. And that's the reason why no matter how much you struggle, there is always something that you lack of because there is scarcity. The inherent limitation of our natural resources, financial resources, factors of production, time, and energy. And so that's the reason why in the Philippines we have plenty of economic problems. We have a lot of economic problems in our country, and so these are just few of them, and these are actually the most apparent problems in our country. Number one is low economic mobility. Next is poverty and income inequality. We have poor health and nutrition and environmental degradation. Some of the key challenges of the Philippines that the Philippines is facing in its development trajectory. The Philippines is a developing country, a rapidly developing country. We are rising from poverty, but the reality still strikes us. No matter how good the leadership in our country, it still remains. We have low income mobility, poverty, so on and so forth. And we have to adapt these particular goals that have been provided by the United Nations called the Sustainable Development Goal. I know that you have heard probably already this, and we have to score ourselves using these 17 SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals, whether or not we're doing enough or we are struggling too much. In the last video that I'll be uploading for this three-part series, we'll be looking into what are the strategies of the government in order to address these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, when I speak of low income mobility, it simply means that it is the ability of someone to change their income or wealth. It is measured over generations during one's lifetime. Research have found that the best way to improve one's mobility is through education. But increasing cost of education is creating a block to those starting out in low-income families. It's a form of structural inequality that keeps the poor from improving their lives. Low-income mobility simply means that there is an inherent problem in our country for a poor to transition in becoming rich. Our transition is very slow, not like in the United States or in Japan, wherein when you start as a poor person, you can actually be rich in a matter of months or in a matter of 1 year, 2 years. But here in our country, we have to dedicate a lifetime in order for you to become rich, to be called somebody that is a millionaire or probably a billionaire for that matter. So there is low income mobility in our country. Now, we should be very thankful that we have free tuition. And Bam Aquino actually provided that particular law in the Senate and authored this particular law in order to induce the government to provide free tertiary education in the Philippines in order to enable those from the bottom to go up in the middle class and start from there. And it would be quite a better future in the near decades to come because there are more students, more of the young ones are studying in state universities with free tuition. And you are actually one of those who are few enough and lucky to have this particular program of the government applied to you. So you have to be thankful with the government because you have free tuition and free miscellaneous fees. Then we have poverty and income inequality. The Philippines has a fairly high poverty rate with more than 16% of the population living below the poverty line. Because many of the people are reliant on agriculture for an income and inequality in wealth distribution. About 17.6 million Filipinos struggle to afford basic necessities. Now, economics actually educate us how these particular things happen. And this is because actually of an historical struggle of independence, slavery, and colonization. And that's the reason why we are actually so poor because we were unable to develop ourselves well because we were under several powers in the history of our country. And so even if during the time when we gained independence, we were actually ruled by incompetent leaders that resulted into these economic turmoils that we have. And so we have 17 million Filipinos who are having problems even to satisfy their basic needs. Economics would tell us that if these 17 million Filipinos would not educate themselves or probably have a job, then they will continue to have a problem in our country. And of course, as the image that is displayed in the screen suggests, there is a huge discrepancy in the income inequality in our country. In just one image that is displayed in the screen, you see, right, a slum of very, very poor people, way, way below the poverty line. And you see exactly the rich and of the riches that they have on the further side of the image. So this is an example of inequality. On the other side, you have a lot of people who are very rich and enjoying the richness. On the other side of the same picture displays the struggles of those who cannot even afford to buy food for the day. Then we have poor health and nutrition. The undernutrition facts in the Philippines are disturbing. 1 in 3 among 12 to 23-month-old children suffer from anemia, while 1 in 3 children are irreversibly stunted by the age of 2, and stunting rates remain at 30% level or more among children 3 to 4 years old. What do we mean by stunted? It means that we are short, putot, mga putot ang mga Pilipino. Why? Because of undernutrition. We are so undernourished. And we don't have the health facilities that we need. If you look at the picture that is displayed in your screen, it specifically describes how the Philippines look like in the real world. Our hospitals are full packed. We cannot even, admit patients now, especially during the pandemic, because we have limited beds, and then we also have limited food, and so that's the reason why we have to strive harder in order to make the Philippines a better country in the near future. Then we have environmental degradation. It's one of the fastest growing countries in Asia. The Philippines faces environmental challenges with disproportionate impacts on poor and women. Ineffective management seriously degrades the country's significant biodiversity resources. Water and air pollution levels exceed generally accepted healthy standards. Greenhouse gas emissions are increasing from the transport to power sectors, and the country is ranked as one of the most vulnerable to the impact of environmental disasters. If you look at the picture, that's a problem. We have a slum. We have a garbage dumping area in the middle of the forest, a lot of coconut trees, and the residues of these garbage actually flows to the underground water, and when you drink it, it is contaminated with a lot of bacteria and viruses, and that is so dangerous. And people are burning these garbages, and so that's the reason why it also increases the emission of carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide to the atmosphere, that increases our contribution to the emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere that helps warm the planet. Of course, I have an argument on that I'm against the idea that the world is suffering from climate change, but nevertheless, the idea there is we have this problem, and it is an apparent problem, and we can see it, and so we have to find ways, studying economics, to address these particular problems. Aside from the fact that we are experiencing quite a lot of environmental degradation through the seemingly unstoppable mining industry in our country, that at some point resulted to lives lost in induced human-made disasters that includes landslides to mined sites.